Hello YouTubers. Continuing my narrative reviews of movies and shows that have subsequent and culminating entries of this year. I actually am looking to gear up for the Attack on Titan finale. I had wanted to show a progression of my own experience, because my first video was on Mario, going from Mario to sort of the shows I watched in between, that then led up to me discovering Attack on Titan, which include Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra and She-Ra, but I'm not really going to have time for that. But I realize I do have time for at least one, and I'm going to do the one that is still continuing, which is Dragon Prince. So I'll be releasing 2 Dragon Prince videos, one on the first 3 seasons and one on the new seasons, because A, there's very disparate responses to the 2, and also because it is something that Attack on Titan also does. It has 3 seasons that kind of act as a set, and then more episodes that expand on it. So it works as a sort of exercise in what it looks like and feels like when you sort of have like dual sets of seasons. And to recap, the way I do these reviews is I will be reviewing 15 narrative tenets called a nature of order, and for each tenet I will be ascribing it a color ranking. At the end of each review, I will then average out all those colors to give an overall review of the movie. So, without further ado, let's begin. Number 1, levels of scale. And with Dragon Prince, on some level, the show's levels of scale are not anything new. We have a group of heroes stuck between 2 warring factions trying to save the world, which is kind of, it's good, but it's basic, which would be indicative of green. But what makes me go blue here are, well, the levels of these factions. Because at the very top, we have the human world versus Zadia, and then at the next level, we have 5 different human kingdoms and 6 different elvish races, with each elvish race linked to an element of the show's magic system: moon, sky, fire, etc. And then beneath each one of these levels are the different characters and the person-to-person character work. So yes, Callum and Ezran begin at the low level underneath Katalas, and Rayla is simply a soldier of the Moonshadow Elves, but their adventure takes them closer and closer to the highest level of trying to understand the hate between the 2 macro factions. And given how impressed I was that the show took its time in exploration of this scale, with the first season primarily focused just on Katalas and the Moonshadow Elves, but the second and third seasons introducing the other kingdoms and other races, that's good stuff, which means blue. Strong centers is also blue, because within the aforementioned levels of scale there are center points to each. Katalas acts as the de facto center of the human world, with our heroes a part of the center, and then the Stormspire more or less acts as the center of Zadia. At the very beginning of the narrative, it feels like Katalas is the center of the entire show, but then this changes over the course of the 3 seasons, which I give it credit for. And early on, King Harrow, who is the human representation of Katalas, is taken off the board, and we already know that the dragon Avizandum has been killed before the show started. If each one of these kings represent the centers of the respective worlds, then the show, in many ways, is about what these worlds are meant to do with their centers taken away, even if the physical centers still remain. And then through flashback, we see just how these 2 central kings, encircling each other, ended in tragedy, and in some ways destroyed each other. Having said all of this, however, the show's true center is the titular Dragon Prince himself, Ozymandias, or Zim, who of course is of Zadia, but having been kept in Katalas and later raised by Ezran, he indeed ends up representing a moving center that genuinely can unite both sides, with the visuals, pacing, and theming all supporting this. Meanwhile, we slowly see the growth of this center's thematic dark shadow in the form of aaravos, who is also able to exist across both worlds, but exists to destroy rather than unite. And given my praise of this already, and how impressed I was that this thematic center is allowed to move, literally and figuratively, there is an argument to be made that this should be purple. The only reason it isn't, really, is that all this work ends up making our lead characters somewhat feel like supporting players who exist to support and understand the true centers, with Viren playing support for aaravos and our heroes playing support for Zim, and I can see this changing in later seasons, but for just the first 3, this fact keeps this from a purple, as much as I respect the work being done here. Boundaries. From the very beginning of the story, we are introduced to the literal boundary, the border, sometimes called the breach, that divides the human world and the magical world. And this aspect starts as literal, but becomes thematic as the story goes on, with Callum continually being told that he can't use magic because he is human, and him trying to push against this boundary being a key aspect of his character growth, whilst Claudia keeps crossing the proverbial boundary of a more malevolent kind of dark magic when she decides to save her brother at the end of season 2, thereby thematically crossing over from being a kind of dorky love interest supporting character to one of the series' villains. And the only reason this aspect is a green and not a blue is, while I have heavy respect for the way the show takes its time in the first 2 seasons of crossing many of these boundaries, like the amount of effort it takes to remove the magical bracelet from Rayla's arm in season 1, hatching the Dragon Prince and Zim being able to remove that bracelet easily, the amount of work needed for our heroes to simply cross the breach into Zadia, etc. Once the show reaches the 3rd season, I feel like it plays way more fast and loose with these boundaries, which I was less a fan of. You can already see the show beginning to play fast and loose with this when it allows Soren to be revived from being paralyzed without any real after effects, despite the aforementioned thematic effects that it has on Claudia. But the ease in which the show dispatches the King Ezran plot, the ease in which the humans cross over to Zadia, the ease at which Ezran fast travels to the Stormspire, felt like some of the show's careful pacing in the first 2 seasons got replaced by much more haphazard rules. And even so, the good far outweighs the bad, so a green feels justified. Alternating repetition, a blue, because even with the haphazard pacing of the 3rd season, the show stays true to playing with alternating repetition of its 2 different plots, and much of this work ties back to the theming as well. So in the beginning, we alternate between our Katalis characters and the Moonshadow Elves preparing for their assassination, with Callum and Rayla contrasted as being characters who don't exactly fit into the more violence-oriented aspects of their respective factions. And then after the first 3 episodes, our lead characters kind of become their own faction, and they're sort of Team Zim, and thus on the side of fighting for unification, while at the same time Viren descends more and more towards a representation of this violence incarnate, all the while these character archetypes get closer and closer to the center point of their respective alternating sides, Zim on one side, aaravos on the other, and then the show also leads into parallelism here in regards to when these alternating plots hit checkpoints. So Viren sort of sees aaravos for the first time in around the same episode when Zim is hatched. And then in season 2, Viren explains his side of the backstory whilst Callum reads his dad's letter. And then Callum's magic is awakened around the same time a flailing Viren returns to aaravos and embraces him wholeheartedly. Though this precise pacing isn't as strong in 3, once the season enters its endgame with Viren's march on Zadia versus our heroes gathering at the Stormspire, this tenet comes alive in full force once again, so blue. Positive space. Like other animated fantasy shows like Avatar or even some of the Mario games, the color aesthetics of the show come alive greatly, with the characters popping extremely well in the different environments and worlds. And there is also a thing that I like, in that the show plays with our perceptions a little bit, and what conventional positive space looks like. So think of it this way: we're introduced early on to the Moonshadow Elves, who are almost a representation of negative space, and they're a danger to King Harrow, who's positive space. But as the show goes on, we begin to see that conventional positive space, negative space can each be used for good or bad. So Viren becomes more and more obsessed with taking up as much space as possible, whilst leaning on aaravos, who is the purest representation of negative space used for evil. And meanwhile, as we begin to see Callum learn aspects of the magical tenets, he needs to go on a journey in pure negative space to access the understanding of his powers. And all while our heroes are sneaking through the shadows and trying to evade capture, but of course they do need to come around to visible positive space again in order to fight for their livelihoods. Now, some of this work is kind of tropey, because it's all about needing to find balance between the spaces, and that the extremes of these spaces are the true danger, and that's why I'm going green instead of blue, but it's done very well, so green. Good shape, blue. I have talked about the evolving shape of the Dragon Prince, and this is in line with the evolving shape of the story's strong center, as well as the evolving shape of the main conflict, the narrative. Because as Zim evolves, so does the evolving shape of our understanding of how he was taken through the flashbacks and the backstory leading up to all of it. Whilst his opposite, aaravos, begins to take a more menacing shape, literally, because the more entrenched he becomes into Viren's mind, or the single white strand of hair that represents how Claudia is slipping more and more towards villainy. And additionally, as I'm a fan of evolving quotes, it is worth mentioning the quote that I think represents the evolution of Callum as a character, as we realize in Season 2, Episode 6, that the quote, "I want to talk to you about growing up and how sometimes you have to face things that you are not ready for," he got from his stepfather. And some other good shape examples I find to be a bit more haphazard, like Ezran giving himself up in a parallel of his dad's last sunset, I found to be less powerful than the show seems to think it is. And the dark magic representation of Viren's endgame army is so on the nose, I almost dock the show points for this. And probably these bits keep it from a purple, but the evolving good shapes at the core of the narrative, blue. For local symmetries, I'm going to give that a green. The interesting thing about this category is that there are two kinds of local symmetries that I see present in the show. And on the one hand, there are the aforementioned symmetries across the different micro-factions of either side of the conflict. So there's symmetries across the 5 human kingdoms and then symmetries in the 6 different elven races. So the show invites comparison and symmetrical feelings on these levels. And for this one, I feel a little mixed as to how the show uses them. I have faith that more and more characteristics will be explored in the later seasons, but in the first few seasons, I do feel that some of these symmetries are a little simple. Like the 3 or 2 older kings, when Viren has the meeting of the Pentarchy in Season 2, are almost interchangeable. And I like seeing the different aspects of the elven races, but I guess I just wanted more, I guess. And I guess that's the point, because the first few seasons are giving us aspects of this tenet and these symmetries, letting us know that it's there, but it's kind of set up to be explored later, which is fine, but I think that does hold this tenet back a little bit. But what gets this category to a green instead of a white are the character symmetries. There are smaller ones like comparisons between Bait and Zim, but my favorites are the symmetry that gradually gets mined out through flashback that Harrow and Avazandum are more alike than they are different. And especially the symmetrical relationship of General Maya and Janai that acts as a mirror to Callum and Rayla, both of which feed the same theme of trying to find a bridge between our differences, which I like. So in total, I think all this averages out to a green, and that feels fair. Getting to Deep Interlock. There are some very well done aspects here, like how how much is mined out of Rayla's bracelet, Harrow's letter, and several characters like the fire dragon Para, who comes back in season 3. This is blue, by the way. Or Corvus, who tracks the kids for the entire first 2 seasons. Even the reveal that the dragon from the opening narration is Sol Regum, who also shows up in season 3. And in a different context, because in the opening he appears to be this altruistic beacon of, fantasy hope. But then in truth he's revealed to be this cruel being, even though he's a dragon. So at the same time, I think there are other aspects that are haphazard. Like, there are several characters and events like the blind sailor or the girl with the dog who only appear once. But that feels okay, because then that feels, again, to a kind of event-based high fantasy genre. There are other events that feel like they should be major interlocking moments, but then kind of don't. Like, I understood that Amaya's forces were limited, but I also felt like they kind of were just taken off the board after she destroys the breach and is captured by Janai. Or when Ezran becomes king, it feels like the narrative is working, like the script is trying to work him to have him flip places with Viren so then the Dark Army endgame story can continue. And thus, Ezran's coronation, which feels like this major moment with a lot of kingdom-wide consequences, is diluted. However, I find that the story's climax, when you realize that a slew of Ezran supporters, off-screen, went and found Queen Anya of Durin, and then followed the Dark Army to the Stormspire to provide aid, that makes up for a lot of this. Because it's very rare that the support coming over the hill trope actually makes logical sense, so I give the show tremendous props for making it make sense. Otherwise, I'd probably go green, balancing out, but I feel like that ending makes up for a lot of Season 3's other mishaps, and the rest also does work well in its own right, so blue. Contrast, we're going purple, because this story and the micro and the macro is all about contrast, but also how that can evolve and change. As characters go, I love the evolution of Claudia versus Soren, in which Soren comes across as the loyal soldier in league with his father, who embraces unhealthy aspects of masculinity, while Claudia is the lovable doofus who just happens to practice dark magic. But over 3 seasons, their poles gradually but ultimately switch, with Soren ultimately able to be more willing to see the light and walk away, while Claudia leans deeper and deeper into what dark magic can do. And the reasoning is because she wants what remains of her family. We force Callum and Rayla to constructively disagree when it comes to their different paths, and then that's connected to elves versus humans at the highest level. There's Zim versus Aaravos as a strong center poles, especially when you keep in mind that this is a kids genre. The fact that the story is able to balance all of this, that's remarkable stuff. And I also have to mention the show's comedy here, which I'd say actually does work for the most part to enhance the story, rather than detract from it, because there are a few instances, like the group's fight against the monsters at the end of season 1. I thought that was played a little too much for laughs, but say, Rayla's style of humor, every time she pretends to be a human, that's completely endearing and I love it. Or the way Gren is used as a character, or how Soren's comedic elements gradually reveal that this is who he really is. He's the lovable one, and this is part of his source of redemption. So for all of the stuff that goes into it, yes, purple for contrast. Graded variation is green. It's a little hard to gauge because many of our heroes don't exactly change, or rather the change they're trying for hasn't fully come about yet. And much of this change you see on the ground is from Viren, and the characters around the center who I feel change the most are actually Claudia and Soren, who I feel it's expertly done. But since our leads I feel only change minimally, and the change they're trying to impart on the world, like, we're united at the end, but that change will not be seen until season 4. so I can't go too big here. I almost go to give the show its most props for the stuff that's shown in flashback, which is the Harrow, Viren, Ozymandian stuff showing how the present came to be and how this trickles down to our heroes, and that's all great. But this is also flashback in the past stuff, which makes green make more sense than blue. Roughness, however, is blue, because again, most of our show's best uses of roughness is on the macro, showing how the different characters and roles within the greater conflict can be gradually revealed to be more nuanced than they seem. The characters you don't think can work together actually can, Callum, Rayla, Amaya, Janai, and gradual reveals that the story's world and magic system is also more rough than it seems, that the rules of magic are, as the famous quote goes, more guidelines than actual rules. But again, outside of some of the side characters like Claudia and Soren, I think many of the characters aren't as rough as you might think, in that our heroes more or less have to stay true to themselves and gain confidence, and that our lead villains, Vir and aaravos Kasif, are pretty much wholly bad with a capital B. Viren may have had good in him a long time ago, and again, props for the flashbacks, but for the bulk of the narrative, he's pretty much more black and white than rough. All in all, none of this stuff is bad. If there was more of it, I might be tempted to go purple, but I do feel it's more blue level here than purple. Echoes. Green. Again, I kind of feel like the theme exists, the search for balance and trying to come together amidst our differences, and then our heroes exist around the theme, which maybe is the point, and that keeps Echo as a green instead of a blue for me. The areas and aspects that are true echoes, like Harrow is an echo of Katalis, Viren is an echo for dark magic, aaravos is an echo for the theme's opposite, which is chaos and destruction. Those I feel exist at a higher level than most of our characters orbit around. Callum and Rayla do, I think, have some decent stuff to do around this echo, as they have to learn to find balance in themselves, their past, and with each other in order to win the day. And the later seasons do this actually a little deeper with these characters elevated to higher level positions in the narrative. But for the first 3 seasons, green feels right. And Void, also green. The thing about Void in this show, and keep in mind this is a kid's show, is when the show goes for Void, it hits. Season 1 King Harrow's death episode and that damn sunset montage that gives me chills anytime I watch, like those Season 2 flashbacks that show us how Queen Sarai died, Season 3 undercut some of this, but the actual moments of Soren getting paralyzed, and Ezran finding out that King Harrow has died and needing to get past it to become king, heck yeah. Callum having to dive into a literal void in order to find the source of his magic. And then the final 3 episodes, which track Avazandum's death, Soren's speech about his dad being a villain, and the finale, are all fantastic, and especially the final battle. And I mentioned the Queen Anya thing, in which the show plays the dragon card, which makes you think that the relief card has been played. And then Viren's army counters the dragons, and then that feels real. So it's like, whoa, is this all there is? And then when the actual relief of Anya's army, then this feels genuine. Because it wasn't teased or anything, but it actually makes logical sense. And then the twist of Soren killing Viren before the twist revealing that the real Viren escaped the battle and now is up there in the Stormspire, alone with Zim, Bait, and Rayla, alone in this vast empty space akin to how the void can be literally used. Like, all of these dangerous moments, you feel the F out of them. So I wish the show had gone for more Void more, and I think a lot of the back half of Season 1 maybe didn't do as much with this as it could, and then, again, Season 3's haphazardness in the first half, Soren getting unparalyzed, somewhat undercut the excellent use of Void in Season 2, and that keeps it from a blue, but when the show goes for it, it hits. Intercom is also green. You can probably see a pattern developing here. I give the show lots of props for the first 2 seasons, similar to Deep Interlock with how slow things mine out, the way the show reveals Harrow's letter, how it has to intermix with emergent emotions of both Callum and then Ezran, while the slow reveal of Viren's flashbacks and the introduction of Aaravos tee up more emergent mysteries. And then I docket points for how fast it speeds through much of Season 3. Even though the emergent reveals of Rayla's home, Avazandum's death, and the final episodes are great, but, like, green, it all averages out to green. And not separateness, though, I'm going white. And hear me out here, because this is my lowest ranking on the last tenet. See, the show had a chance to push this tenet much higher by separating Callum and Ezran after Season 2. But with all of the built-up character work over the first 2 seasons, it makes us feel ready to embrace this separateness but not separate tenet. And then it squanders it by reuniting them pretty quickly, all things considered. There are stray good bits here in the margins, like how you feel Viren's influence on his kids, even when he's not around. Same with Harrow's influence on his kids. And then there are other aspects like Amaya and Gran, or the not-separateness of Rayla and her homeland. The build-up to reuniting her with Azadia does feel earned. Given the show that really had a chance to push the envelope with this tenet, with Callum and Ezran, and then backtracked on it, I wasn't a fan of that. And like the other speedy stuff in Season 3 too, like Viren's defeat at the end of Season 2 feels big, separating him from power and thereby inviting us to see how he can't really be separated from it because his influence lives on, or still exists even when he's in jail. But it's only in jail for 4 episodes, and that how fast he is freed undercuts some of that tension, and that pushes it closer to the light. But some of the higher level not separateness from Viren and Harrow from the beginning, which then leak out through the rest of the narrative, that keeps it from a yellow for me. And you could argue it should be closer to a green, but of all the tenets, this is probably the one that I want to be better. So, honest reaction, and gotta stand by it. So, to summarize, levels of scale: blue. Strong centers: blue. Boundaries: green. Alternating repetition: blue. Positive space: green. Good shape: blue. Local symmetries: green. Deep interlock: blue. Contrast: purple. Graded variation: green. Roughness: blue. Echoes: green. Void: green. Intercom: green. Not separateness: white. And so then for my overall ranking, I'm going to do another mixed color ranking, and I'm going to give Dragon Prince seasons 1 to 3 light blue. And so what that means is that it is closer to a blue than a green, but it is not a full blue. And basically, I think that fits because in brass tacks, the show does tremendous work, especially on the macro level, even though sometimes it feels like our leads are circling around it and its tension more than their own characterizations. And then the first half of Season 3 remains quite messy, as there are some moments of tension that get undercut, like Viren being freed super quickly and Soren being unparalyzed even more quickly. However, when the show lands, it lands. And even with Season 3 being a little messy, once it finds its footing, the finale hits just as well as the others. And the show's reputation as the spiritual successor to Avatar, and even on some level, there's an argument that it's a semi-spiritual successor to Lord of the Rings. That's a stretch, I know, but name another classical, medieval, high fantasy epic with dragons and elves of the last 20 years that lands and is centered as well as this one. Like, the fair comparisons. And it carefully balances its tones of being enjoyable for all ages, but also with a genuinely mature edge that tackles very mature subject matter with aspects of race, prejudice, generational trauma, and a couple of hiccups make sense in holding it back from a true blue, but light blue basically means that it is, again, closer to blue than it is to green, and that fits. So we'll see. I'll be reviewing the next 2 seasons, and we'll see how they fare too. And before leaving, I like to list my high-level memories of the experience, and what this is I go through all my memories that I can label as blue, blue-purple, light purple, purple, or even higher. I call it high purple. And I'm going to just run these off really quickly because it's 3 seasons. It's a lot of them. But for my blue memories, I love saving Ezran from the frozen ice. I feel like that's the coming together of our core team. Then Renan's fate, which feels very serious, and it's when you really see Viren as dangerous. Meeting Aaravos, early in season 2, again, teasing up those emergent mysteries. The back and forth with Claudia and Soren early in season 2, like, really is like a tipping point for their relationship to our leads. Ezran's conversation with Claudia in the season 2 finale, again, I really like these 2 characters that you wouldn't think really have a lot in common, but this conversation leads each of them to do what they think is the right thing, but only one of them is really doing the right thing. Then Viren embraces Aaravos in the season 2 finale, going on full villainy. There's good build up to it. It took 2 seasons to get there. Then Soren's speech on villainy and his dad in the penultimate episode is the semi-completion of his arc. And then I really like Zim beckoning his mom in the finale, because Zim almost exists as the symbol for most of the show, but in this scene you see him as just this child kid, even though he's a dragon who just wants his mom. And it's such a beautiful, humanizing moment for our strong center. Up to blue-purple memories, I love the mystique of the reveal when the Dragon Prince is revealed to be alive, and then Zim's birth at the end of season 1, and I love that he immediately frees Rayla from the bondage, which all the characters can't do, but he just does it immediately, and you can immediately whoa, this is the most powerful character on the show, even though he's a baby. I love Callum's trial in his mind when he unlocks the Sky Arcanum and goes through all sorts of his own anxiety. And in these same sequence of episodes, this is when you realize that Rayla really does have feelings for him. So it's this culmination of a lot of aspects. And then next, Ezran finding out that Harrow is dead is not played for laughs, not played in any way other than just as serious as it can be. And I love that. King Ezran, when he returns to Katalis and embraces his destiny, even though they then undercut it several episodes after, but in this moment, it lands and you feel it. The death of Avazandum, he gets turned to stone and you see the one tear as he's reaching out to his family. Again, a character that is just a symbol for most of the runtime, but then in this moment, he's just a scared dad who happens to be a dragon. And then the real final battle in the Stormspire, just Viren versus Zim, Bait, and Rayla. You feel the danger. I love that Bait gets something really necessary to do. I love all of that. even higher, light purple. Viren's meeting of the Pentarchy. It's great world building, it's great context for his character, and it's great for the symmetries of the human kingdoms, which is interspersed with King Harrow's letter, which has been built up for like a full season now, and you feel the development of Callum reading it. I also like Viren manipulating his kids in the third season. Like, it's the most landing moment when you realize the damage that Viren's influence has on his kids, and also as a turning point for both Soren and Claudia. In the same episode, Rayla's return home, which feels culminating, but also is a tragedy because she's been ghosted, hits just as hard as any other moment. Getting to main purple, that flashback in middle season 2, when Sarai dies, that is not played for laughs at all. That's just sad, and you feel it, and you feel all the context, you feel Viren's tragedy, Harrow's, all of it, everyone trying to do the right thing, but that's how it ends. And it ends with Harrow saying the quote to Callum, and yeah, you feel it. And then finale episode, Queen Anya turns the tide, aforementioned. I love that it makes logical sense. I love that you don't see it coming, but it still makes logical sense. And I know some people don't exactly like it, but I love the Baker being there. I don't know why, I just do. And then the biggest culminating moment, the completion of Callum's arc, at least in this set. Rayla, I love you. Manus, Pluma, Volantis. And it takes a very well done show to have the love can save the world trope work because it's used so much, but this one really works. But number one, my one high purple memory of this set is Last Sunset, because I feel like it encapsulates all the themes, the melancholic tragedy, the buildup of where the center is going, the resignation, the mature edge of the show, the beautiful music. It is the moment I was hooked on this show, because before then there's some nice buildup of the different characters, but it still does feel like a kid's show on some levels. But this moment is as serious as you'd see in any show. And I wouldn't say it's the greatest movie of all time that I would rank as a rainbow, but it is still, I get chills anytime I watch it. And I've probably seen that clip dozens of times. So those are my thoughts of Dragon Prince seasons 1 through 3. I will do seasons 4 through 5 next, and then after that I will be doing my Attack on Titan reviews. Reviewing seasons 4 and 5 may not be fully fair because they're all part of the Mystery of Aaravos seasons 4 through 7 set, and I'll probably come back to the show after season 7 is out and the show's finished, but given I think it is a good experiment to tee up Attack on Titan, and it did just come out a few months ago, I think it's worth taking a look at. Thank you for my thoughts on what really is a wonderful show, and see you all on the other side. Cheers.